Hello, everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Michael, and as always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we are starting the last year of Spidey in the 1980s. We're starting with January of 1989.
That's right, and we are joined by Bex Luthor.
Hi, I definitely wasn't recording, but I'm recording now, so
Ooh,
we're okay.
Good to know. Good to know. Gotta save this for posterity, right? This is an
Yeah.
important discussion.
How many
All right.
episodes has this been? And I just wasn't recording.
100 and something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, because it's so special, we decided to have a very special guest in the form of Bob Porkcarrot Myers. Thank you for joining us, Bob.
Thank you, and that makes me feel better because I hit record like 4 times before it started recording. So now I feel better too.
Par for the course on this podcast. That's okay.
Don't worry, you'll never be as incompetent as I am.
Oh, by the way, just so you guys know, we might have a surge in listenership because I just did a guest lesson at a high school in Windsor all about podcasting, and I talked all about Here Comes the Spider-Cast. So
High schoolers?
Yep. Don't be surprised if our numbers shoot up this episode.
Oh, we're gonna
okay?
get bullied, Mike.
Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
get so bullied.
Mike,
No, don't worry.
no,
Don't worry.
now.
These
Guys,
kids
my
are
team.
into it.
Schoolers love 80s Spider-Man.
Yes. Yes, they
If
do.
there's anything that those Gen Zs love.
They love
That's
nerds.
right. You just
They
watch.
love-
You just watch.
Okay.
And
Fellow children. Welcome.
here we go. The definition of cool, Exhibit A. Web of
Wait,
Spider-Man 46 featuring Nekra in New England.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna get bullied
Case
so
closed,
hard.
folks. We are nerds. This sucks. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna start off recapping this one real quick. I swear, if the cover was ripped off of this issue, I would have told you it was a Marvel team up.
From 1979.
That's how bad this was. That's how bad this issue was. Okay.
I'll just say,
So-
Becca, this is the last fill-in of the 80s, but go ahead, Josh.
Okay.
I knew that. Why'd you tell me?
How did you know? Anyway.
You told
Wow,
me.
I feel bad because this might have been my favorite issue of the
Oh,
week.
geez.
Oh no! I'm so
Okay, we
sorry.
don't want to taint your point of view here. All right.
Okay, so we start off. Peter is in Cape Cod, in like the last stretch of his book tour that he's doing, and first page, this guy starts attacking Peter just for no reason. He's there with his like somebody who works for the talk show host that he's going to talk to, Jeff. And they're kind of chatting, and this guy just like runs up to their car and starts attacking him. Peter flips the guy on his ass, and the police show up and arrest him or whatever. And Jeff kind of like nonchalantly, he's like, "Yeah, we're a small little town. Everybody's kind of going crazy here. Like that's a normal thing that happens." He drops him off at his Airbnb, and he goes to sleep. Peter wakes up in the middle of the night from a bang, and he looks outside and there's an explosion. His rental car is on fire, and there's this mob going towards his Airbnb. Yeah, I want to say bed and breakfast is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So he puts on his Spidey costume, he swings out, he kind of stops all of these guys, webs them up, and then the one guy that he's webbing up, he's like asking him questions like, "Hey, what the heck's going on here? What are you guys doing?" And he just passes right out, like he goes unconscious. So Spidey's like, "Okay, something weird's going on." He goes back to his place. He rings up Jeff. Jeff's like, "Hey," or no, sorry. Jeff calls him and says, "Hey, your car's on fire, blah, blah, blah," like he knows somehow. And Pete plays dumb and says, "Oh, really? I had no idea." So now he's kind of stuck there for another day until a rental can come, another rental could come so he can leave. He goes on the talk show. Everything goes great. Him and Jeff go for a walk afterwards. He kind of tells him like, "Oh yeah, I'm actually going to be heading to therapy. I'll be right back. There's just so much stress going on here that we're all, everybody in the town is like open and happy to go to therapy." So Peter's like, that seems weird. That building's old and creepy. So he follows Jeff in. Jeff goes into his session, and Pete is like trying to convince the secretary to let him in. And she's like, no, we don't like outsiders, just like everybody else in this town has said to Peter. So Peter sneaks in through the air ducts. Turns out that there's like this weird seance happening with these like strobe lights and people in their underwear dancing around Jeff. And he's just like staring into nothingness. So Pete's like, okay, that's weird. So he gets on the phone. Somebody finds him first. Then he gets on the phone and he calls the Avengers Tower. He starts talking to Wanda and he's like, Wanda, listen, I need Hank Pym. Get him over here as quickly as possible. She's like, all right. So Hank Pym heads on over with his Ant-mobile and he starts testing the waters there. And right when he gets the results for the water test, some of these like goons, these like hypnotized goons, knock him out and bring him to this cave. And it turns out that it's Nekra, the high priestess of the cult of hatred, that is behind this. She's been poisoning the waters, hypnotizing everybody. And she's been doing this to somehow find a cure for her like love, nightmare, right? No, not nightmare.
Grim
What's
Reaper.
his name? Grim Reaper.
Oh, Grim Reaper, yeah.
Thank you.
Which is Vision's sort of brother.
Right. So I don't know how her hypnotizing everybody in the town is going to bring him back, but that's her plan, I guess. So they tie Hank Pym up. Spidey comes in and saves the day. He starts webbing her up. He goes and knocks down some of the goons and lets Hank Pym escape. Hank Pym is like throwing gadgets at Nekra, and she's like, not affected by any of it. Pete swings down and like puts her in a headlock and throws her over against the wall, and Hank Pym throws like his last gadget at her, and it like pins her to the wall and like tightens her in so she can't move. So she can't escape now. Hank Pym teams up with Peter. He tosses him like the antidote. I don't know how he was able to make this, but he has an antidote for this like hypnosis. He puts it in his web cartridge. Or he replaces it with his web cartridge and starts spraying everybody, and they kind of come to, and they're kind of released. And then when they turn around to get Nekra, it turns out that she's kind of ran away, and that's the end.
He made the antidote because he brought a mini lab, and he was able to make the antidote by checking the reservoir before they caught him. It's clearly explained.
Oh, right. Sorry, I forgot it happened immediately after he tested the water. You're right.
Yeah, there's no loose ends in this story.
Okay, so before any of us say anything, we should give the table. What do you give to someone when they talk first? Give them the table? No.
High five.
The floor. You give them the floor. We should give the floor to Bob. Bob, I want to know what you thought of this comic, and I suspect you enjoyed it.
I did, but I mean, it should be prefaced with the fact that I'm coming in this from a completely different view than you guys. I'm not reading 4 Spider-Man comics a week. And also, I happen to just love late 70s, early 80s comics, and also love Doctor Strange weird kind of comics. And so this one, just a one-off story of just some weird person taking over a town. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm into it. And kind of loved is strong. I enjoyed a lot of the art, which I'm sure we'll get into. The really detailed backgrounds, which I really liked. Not terribly dynamic by any means, but, at least really detailed, except for the parts where they didn't detail at all and only filled in like colored backgrounds, which makes me think it was maybe a little rushed, but also, So, yeah, I mean, it's not a great comic by any means. I'm judging this on kind of, it's like you said it. It's a really great team up comic. Is really what it is. It's a great version of a Marvel team up, is what it is.
The thing is there's a lot of weird things about this issue that makes me feel like maybe it was written back in the early 80s.
That's except for the reason for Peter being there, that totally fits.
Which they could easily have just written in, after the fact with, a magic marker. But like the thing is,
but the outfits are totally 80s though.
Yeah, okay, but I'm just pointing out, like, for example, the fact that they tie this in to Vision and the Scarlet Witch Volume 2, which came out, I think, a few years earlier.
Okay.
They also reference, like, West Coast Avengers. They also, like, these things are all going on at the same time, but it just feels like, again, like, look at this. They're referencing Avengers 58, Shaun of the She-Devil number 5. It doesn't necessarily mean that this was written at the same time as Shaun of the She-Devil number 5, but the fact that it's so weirdly steeped in other comics, like, it's very rare for Spider-Man comics of this day to be referencing, like, Avengers and Shaun of the She-Devil and Vision. It's like Josh said, it makes it feel at the very least like it was meant for Marvel Team Up, right? So I don't know. I'm just suspicious about what drawer this story was laying in before they decided to publish it,
Yeah, and the team up itself is very, like, flimsy.
Right.
And I think that's why it reminds me of Marvel Team Up, because, like, Hank Pym, or this is Henry Pym.
Well, it's the same guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is Hank and Henry interchangeable?
Yeah, just like Hank McCoy is Henry McCoy. Yep.
Oh, okay.
I learned this all from Marvel Comics. Anyway, I can't name most of my cousins. Okay.
I guess that makes sense since they're on a team together. They would change his name to be Henry.
Do you guys not have lots of Hanks and Henrys in Canada?
Right.
Sorry?
Do you guys not have lots of Hanks and Henrys in Canada?
We have Henrys, but nobody calls himself Hank. Do they?
Yeah,
I guess
in the
Hank's
States?
very American.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But actually, the only Hank I know is a nickname Hank because his last name is Hankowich. So
The only Hank I know is Pym and McCoy.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It was just like the reason for him to be there makes sense, but him showing up and him being like an actual part of the story is so like it's a second thought. You know what I mean? Like it's like not even part of the story. Even Peter being here is like strange. Like I know that he's there for the interview and everything, but it's just like getting right into it and him being like attacked. I was like, did Mike send us the wrong comic? Is this like a part 2 of a story? I was like lost. Yep. I don't know.
Yeah.
The issue just, I don't know, to me felt like not fleshed out, I guess.
Yeah. Bex Luthor.
So picture this. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. You have to get up for a conference call that is completely useless information. So you're like, perfect time to read the comics that I have been neglected to read for the podcast that I have to do in 8 hours. All right, let's do this. So I'm scrolling and I'm reading. I found myself zoning out of the Spider-Man comic to listen to my conference call. I was like, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, shit. No, this one's not for me. I think it was definitely written a while before, because it has not have the same flow as current Web of at all. Whoever's drawing Nekra fucking hates her. Why do they do this to this woman? She doesn't look like this ever again. Why does she look like a creepy ghost vampire lady?
I'm not familiar with her. Have you seen her in anything else?
She's currently in the Pit of Exile on Krakoa because she's a mutant.
Get out of town. Wow,
no,
I didn't know that.
No,
yeah, I'd never heard of this character before. So
she's very, very minor. Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, I see her in like the Marvel universe. Yeah, completely different look even back then. Yeah,
she doesn't. Okay. She doesn't look like this. And she doesn't look like this in anything else from this era either.
And all the Google images, she's not wearing clothes.
Oh well.
Oh well.
Changed,
that's a whole other thing.
We gotta change that. So he put more clothes on her and made her weirder looking. So good for you. Nekra's fun. She falls in love with Grim Reaper, obviously, and he dies. So she brings him back with her power of hatred, and then he comes back. But then she falls in love and she doesn't have any hate in her heart, so he dies again because it's the hate keeping him alive. So then she brings him back alive, and but with the caveat that he has to, in order to stay alive, he has to kill somebody every 24 hours. So he immediately kills her.
Oh my god.
So he kills her, and then eventually she comes back to life. Oh, I forget who brings her back to life, but she's brought back to life to kill Dr. Druid. Remember Dr. Druid from a couple?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With a gun.
Cool.
That's all I really know about her. That's all.
Dang.
Well, here's the thing. This comic, the one thing I'll give it is like if I was not reading 80s Spidey every week, and I just read this comic, I would enjoy the retro vibe it has. Like the art looks very retro, right? The dialogue, the story, everything's very retro. But I think that we've read so many Spidey comics that I've become jaded, and I'm just impatient with this stuff. And I'm kind of like you, Becca. This is the first Spider-Man comic in a long time where I found myself skim reading it because I thought it was so badly written.
Yeah,
Like,
it was just
by the
really
time
hard to read.
Right. It's like it doesn't want you to read it. It wants you to not read it. That's what I felt like.
There was this guy, what's his name? The redhead guy who only speaks in like
Jeff.
not movie quotes. He only speaks in like movie metaphors.
Right.
And I'm like, Jeff, what are you saying, man? I don't know what you're trying to tell me. Maybe it's a 70s way of talking, and I just couldn't vibe with it.
Uh-huh.
It just made it hard to read, and then when it's hard to read, like, I don't want it to be hard to read. I want it to be fun to read. This is what I'm doing in my free time. Like,
right. Yep.
I don't know.
You're all jaded.
I already knew that.
I did have a couple things I wanted to ask about on this comic.
Sure.
Which I assume you guys have talked about. I apologize. I haven't listened to your show in a few weeks. But I know that Peter
That's
Parker's
fair.
been on this book tour thing. But is it explained how Peter Parker and Spider-Man are always in the same place and it's never a problem? Or do they just like, nobody cares? We just brush over that?
Yeah, don't
they
worry about
kinda
it.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Well,
Yep.
they kind of say, like, oh, Spider-Man's also following Peter on the tour. So that's why he keeps showing up.
Because he has to keep taking pictures of Spider-Man. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
Well,
and
'cause,
a
like-
couple of times too, like Spider-Man has showed up to like the events. So whenever he kind of shows up where people know that Peter's there, they're kind of like, "Oh, Spider-Man's here for the press tour too," and then that's kind of it.
Everyone's just stupid.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
It's,
The other thing I really liked is Spider-Man calls the West Coast Avengers and they're all just hanging out by the pool, just like doing nothing. And it made me think of like comics and like New Mutants, or maybe like if like Kitty Pryde calls the actual Avengers and they can never get anybody. You call the Avengers and it's always just some schlub answering the phone. The Avengers are always out. The West Coast Avengers, so they're not doing anything. They're just hanging out by the pool. They got nothing going on. Clearly the West Coast Avengers haven't figured out.
the thing
And I
is,
just-
Yeah, as far as this continuity is concerned, Wanda just had the twins, so
She looks good for just having twins.
I know, right?
Yeah, and also like pretty chill with like a drink in her hand by the pool.
Yeah.
like,
But like
just
Vision's
chilling.
there, Hank has no problem just popping over. It's just like, oh, okay, you guys aren't doing anything right now.
That's great.
Okay.
and also I want to point out that at this point, obviously, Hank Pym was not any of his 4 superhero identities. They were trying to establish him just as Hank Pym. But why does he have to have this weird red, like, overall
Jumpsuit.
uniform? Yeah, like
He looks
No.
like the $6 million man. I was like, what is going on here?
I will
What?
defend
I'm sorry,
that.
that reference might be too old for all of you. I'm sorry.
You'll
It's just
defend it,
fashion.
Becca?
No, I will defend the jumpsuit. It is fashion. It just
What
understand.
decade? Okay.
The 70s when this was written.
Okay. Yeah, and again, one thing I want to say about Nekra is she looks retro. She looks like a 70s like Supergirl villain, which is fine. It just seems very out of step with the rest of the Spider-Man comics published at this time, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
just
I mean, this feels, when compared with the next couple, the Amazing Spider-Man comics, this feels 15 years out of step.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
So I can say for the record, for the first time in a while, I do not recommend this comic. I can think you can easily skip it and just go to the next one. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, unfortunately the same. I'm actually I've really been enjoying these like weird one-off issues with Peter on tour, but for some, I don't know, this one just doesn't work for me.
Not good. Yep. Becca?
Yeah, no. Not this one, fam. Sorry.
Okay.
I think you could skip it and just know that you're missing 400 different small, very minuscule little gadgets and devices that then turn into regular size. Because Hank Pym's trying to distance himself from the fact that he's Ant-Man by only doing things that Ant-Man does.
And bringing his miniature lab along.
Yes.
Because that's the thing normal people do.
Exactly. Hank Pym, you goddamn weirdo. Is this
Bob-
before or after he beat his wife?
Oh, this is after, a few
Okay.
years after, yep.
Cool. Fuck Hank Pym.
I think they explained that by saying he was mind controlled. But anyway, Bob, do you recommend this one?
I mean, probably not, because there are so few people like me who would actually enjoy something this bad. So, no.
All right.
You could like it. You could trust me.
I mean, I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't recommend it to other people, and I wouldn't ever read it again. And I probably wouldn't have read it if it weren't for this podcast. If it weren't for this, I'd have read like 3 pages and be like, nah, I don't need to do this.
Okay.
That's the key. Would you read it again? That's really the test, right? So, okay, knowing you will not read it again, that's pretty much a thumbs down. And now we're going to jump to The Amazing Spider-Man 310, the first of 2 Amazing Spider-Mans that we're going to review this week. And I believe Bex Luthor, you're going to summarize this one, right?
Yeah, and I'm definitely ready.
Well, as you're getting ready, I'm going to talk about Strike Force, the wrestling team with Tito Santana and Rick Martel, I believe it was. Bob,
Ooh,
remember
let's talk
them?
about Strike Force.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Strike Force for the next 11 minutes while Becca opens up her phone.
All right, okay, I'm ready, but go
Oh,
off.
okay,
no,
okay,
go.
that-
I want to hear about this.
No, it's fine. The listeners don't want to hear about Strike Force. They want to hear about Shrike Force, right?
I don't think anybody wants to hear about Strike Force.
I'm not even sure this comic wanted to
No.
Yeah,
talk
true.
about Strike Force.
You know, everybody's favorite villain. He's not Batman because he's got a blonde ponytail.
I do have questions about Strike Force that we can get to once we've done the summary.
Mostly
'cause-
why.
Well, a lot of why, but also did they get sued? So go ahead.
I don't think... Yeah, he doesn't look anything like Batman. What are you even talking about?
No, not at all.
No.
Who's Batman?
Yeah, this is Spider-Man. No
He's
bats.
got blonde hair. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. His name is Bryce Maine. Okay. Strike Force. So we start off with Shrike, and you get a little monologue about how he's a bird. That's cool. He's robbing an armed car, I guess. And then Spider-Man shows up and easily defeats him because he's just a bird guy. And so he flies off, and Spider-Man's like, well, thank God that's over with. And then we get a little bit of recap what's going on and how he is going back to school. We finally have Peter Parker back at the university. And of course, he's whining about how he can't afford it with his multi-million-dollar wife and everything like that. But how are we going to pay for books? Because he needs to have a problem, like always. Like, bruh, your wife is rich. Anyway, he shows back home, and he realizes that he forgot to go to registration. So Mary Jane's like, oh, don't worry. We'll go out for dinner afterwards, and then blah, blah. So shows back up, and he meets his new, the professor that he's going to be the research assistant for, as well as the other research assistant. She's a lovely French girl. And then it turns out that Dr. What is his name? Swan. Dr. Swan.
Yeah.
Is acting real weird as soon as the package gets delivered, and he goes to his office and he slams the door, and the other research assistant was like, he's just being weird lately. So Peter and Mary Jane go out on a date. But before he leaves, his spider sense goes off. That's important. So then he leaves, and then Peter and Mary Jane go on a date. And the whole time he's like distracted. So he tells Mary Jane he's gonna go pick up some ice cream and he'll be back home later. He takes a couple steps and then is like, you know what? I'm not gonna lie to my wife again. And he tells her the actual truth about how his spider sense went off and he's gonna go investigate the lab. So he goes there and he just shows right up. He's like, yo, what up, Doc? I'm here. What's with the shady biz? And the doctor immediately cowers because obviously Spider-Man. And then who shows up but the Tinkerer? Just all the A-listers in this one.
I know. Yep.
So it turns out the Tinkerer has been using Dr. Swan's research lab to build things. And he is building it for the Shriek. So that's... Or what's his name?
The Shrike.
Shrike. Simon. His name is Simon. So we're gonna just call him Simon. So, of course, a fight ensues because Spider-Man is there. And then the Shrike steals the device that the Tinkerer made for him. And the Tinkerer didn't finish it because he knew that Shrike would not pay him. So it doesn't work. Peter kicks him out of a window. And then captures the Tinkerer and is like, yo, Doc, what's the deal? And he's like, well, you know, evil. They're evil and they needed my lab. And he's like, all right, good enough for me. And then, he finds out that Dr. Swan doesn't have his high school diploma. And so the Tinkerer has been blackmailing him into using his facilities because if the world finds out that this amazing scientist who has all of these other degrees doesn't have his high school diploma, then all of it means nothing, I guess. All the science doesn't mean anything. So that was that one.
Well, no, I just saw a meme discrediting Bill Nye because apparently Dolph Lundgren has more qualification to be a scientist, so I'm just laughing at that. But anyway, go ahead.
Topical.
Yeah.
Remember, there's children listening. We need more sound effects. We need to keep the interest.
Children don't love Dolph Lundgren? I'm so out of touch.
When did children stop liking Dolph Lundgren? I don't know. But yeah, that's this one. It was fine.
Are you done?
Yeah, that's the whole comic.
That's all that happened.
Dude, these when they were doing 2 Amazings a month in the summer, or whatever, they rushed these out real quick. They're like 20 pages, let's go over it. Half the pages are just splash shots, a big shot of Spider-Man thinking one thing, and then another one of Mr. Simon over here. There's not much substance to this.
Here's the thing. I mean, obviously, when I was a kid, of the 3 Spider-Man comics, I always was most excited about Amazing, mostly because of Todd McFarlane's art. And I do like David Michelinie's writing, but it just seems like every issue is another B or C-list villain brought out of the cobwebs, dusted off, and then Spidey disposes of him in 2 pages, right? There's never a climax. There's never Spider-Man doesn't really do anything clever to outsmart him or use his powers in a clever way, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost like they only brought out Shrike so that McFarlane could draw his cape. I don't know.
I wasn't gonna say it, but
yeah, it just feels
definitely
very
why.
Look at this. If you look at the climax, how does Spider-Man defeat Shrike? He's fighting Shrike, and then all of a sudden, what does he do? He just punches him, right? Is that the end?
Well, because he steals the device that the Tinkerer made, and then his powers overload. So Spider-Man's like, cool, gotcha, and then kicks him.
Right.
Because the Tinkerer set up some type of...
a failsafe.
A failsafe, right? Because he knew he wasn't going to get paid.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But yeah.
So, Bob,
honestly,
go ahead. Okay, Josh, go ahead.
I'm just going to say it was all worth it for the fact that Shrike's ponytail gets blown off. Honestly.
That is pretty good. Because I hate that ponytail.
It does suck.
Does he still have that ponytail?
I don't know. I'm gonna Google him, but
is he even still around?
If he doesn't, then how do you distinguish him from Batman at all?
Fair.
Right.
He got bird on his chest.
Yeah, he's got a big bird.
Yeah. There's a bird on his chest. It's not a bat. It's a bird. It's different.
It looks like the most modern adaptations of him.
He's in an Iron Man type of suit.
Bob, I don't know if have you talked about McFarlane on our show yet?
No, because I think the other time I was on, we were reviewing the animated series. So
Okay, so what's your take on Todd McFarlane?
my take is, I think, the same as a lot of people. Like he's
a god among
love
insects?
it and hate it at the same time. Like
Right.
he brings something completely different and exciting action things. It's like it looks completely different, but also like some of his face drawings are terrible. His anatomy is just dreadful, and so some of it is like, oh, this is so bad. But like at the
Right.
same time, it's exciting and different. Like comparing it just to the last issue, it's like, okay, this looks so much more exciting than the last issue.
Right.
It's like I get why he was so popular, but so I started reading comics in the 90s, but I didn't fall in love with 90s comics, so I
Sure.
don't have that nostalgia of like, oh my god, 90s comics and McFarlane is the best. That's just not where I come from. So when I look at it, I see it's like, okay, yeah, this is great. This is totally different, but also like, some of this is really bad.
Yeah.
So it's a love-hate thing with McFarlane and definitely with Spider-Man's clown shoes. His feet are just ridiculous all the way through all these drawings.
Yeah, McFarlane is inconsistent, and these past 5 or 6 issues have been really inconsistent because they're bi-weekly. So he's rushing more than usual, and this issue, once again, looks very rushed. Like, some pages are good, some panels are good. Like, for example, page 4 where Spider-Man's looking down the building, right? Like, that perspective is not something you would have seen in a Web of Spider-Man or even Spectacular Spider-Man comic. But at the same time, when you look too closely at the anatomy or any of the details, sometimes things really fall apart. It's like he spends time on things he cares about, but if it's something he doesn't feel like drawing, he just scribbles it and moves on to the next thing. That's what I feel like.
Yeah, when you look at it like from a glance and just kind of flip through it, some of it is just great. The perspectives, some of the drawings of Spider-Man, it's the just flows of the panels together is great. But like when you scrutinize it, some of it's really bad.
Right.
And I'm sure it's not just McFarlane, but like some of his drawings of Mary Jane are quite terrible, especially when compared to the Spectacular we're getting to. Like they go to see Bambi and she's not dressed appropriately to go see Bambi.
Right.
But yeah. So I don't know. I like McFarlane. I'm not here to crap on McFarlane because like I appreciate what he did, but also like he could have been better with a little effort.
Right. What about the script on this one?
I mean, this is why I said I like the Web of more than anything else, because at least it was a story and something happened.
Yes.
Whereas this one's like, okay, this was 4 or 5 pages worth of comic that happened over 20 pages. And it's fine, but it's just like, there's not a ton going on here, and I don't care about Shrike at all. And I mean, the Tinkerer is a B-list, maybe even C-list villain, but
he's cool.
I kind of like the Tinkerer, but they barely use him in this. So.
And the way that he shows up, he just walks out of a closet.
Exactly.
Like, what the hell is going on?
He's just there,
Relatable.
just hanging out in the background. He's like, also, I'm here.
Set up punchline. Anyway.
I feel like this issue would have been better later on in the Amazing Spider-Man run, and we could have continued to have these like weird one-off villains keep showing up with new tech and new ways to defeat Spider-Man, and Spidey's like, what the hell is going on? Why are all these like shitty villains coming back and I'm having to like defeat them all over again? And it's all linked back to the Tinkerer, and we're kind of like, oh, I'm back at school. It's connecting here. My professor that I'm working with is actually working with this bad guy, and that's why all these shitty villains are showing up again. Like if this came back, if this issue was after the Mysterio issue that we're going to talk about next, I think it would be that much better, and they can connect it. You know what I mean? It can kind of like make sense why they're having these like one-off issues, but yeah, I don't know. It was definitely weak to just have like this bad guy that nobody's ever heard of show up, and then the Tinker's just in a closet and we're done. Like there's not even really a fight at the end. You know what I mean?
No,
like,
it's
not that there needs to be a fight, but there's no like conflict. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's not very climactic. It's not like, it doesn't build up to this reveal or anything. Shrike kind of just shows up. They throw a few punches, and then Tinker's like, "Guess what? I have a failsafe," and then it's done.
And that's been happening a lot in Amazing, I find, right? Like a villain will show up out of nowhere, and then he'll get knocked out of nowhere, and then the story just ends.
Yeah, and I've been liking it so far because at least they're like, I at least think that before they were doing something with the villains that were showing up,
right?
Even if they were defeated by the end, like there's still like some sort of like arc, some sort of story that gets resolved by the end. I feel like nothing really changed. Spider-Man didn't even have to be here for this issue.
Right.
Shrike still would have went there. Tinker still would have realized he was getting screwed over and still would have knocked out Shrike. And then like the only thing that changes is that Peter's there, so his professor gets outed as not having a diploma. Like that's it.
Right.
So
I'm sure that will have major repercussions in the coming issues.
No, they won't talk about it at all.
Well, they do talk about it in the next.
I think they mentioned it
for like
as
a second.
how do we solve that problem?
Yeah. It's very like, oh yeah, he's a little upset because the other teachers found out he doesn't have a diploma, but they're okay with it.
He lost his tenure. Oh
yeah, that's right. He loses his tenure.
Yeah.
That's the kids will care about that.
Yeah.
Stay big tenure stands.
Did you have anything else to add to this? I mean, I know you did the summary,
but no,
actually, I have nothing to add. But I could talk for another hour and a half about it. Actually, no. So this comic was only written and drawn because Todd McFarlane did that Batman cover like a year before this. What was Batman 400 and something?
Right, the famous one with his cape.
With the cape and the lady. He drew that and he was like, I want to do that for the rest of my life. And they were like, no, you can't. And he was like, all right, I'm going to do that for the rest of my life anyway.
Yep.
And it's very obvious that this is not as good as that, but there are just some panels that like every time we review Amazing, Josh and I are always like the little snackies, the little bits and pieces that make these so fun to read. There's like an early on one where he gets like booted out of the panel. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Spidey does?
Yeah. And then there's one near the end where
Page 5,
Shriek gets smashed into the end of the panel instead of the wall. And I just love that. Like that's why people like Todd McFarlane, because the panel work is so dynamic. Mm-hmm. He's not just drawing putting pictures in panels. He takes the medium and uses it to its highest potential, which
good point.
Fantastic. Is the anatomy fucked?
Yes.
A little bit. Does looking at the Tinker make me want to vom? Also a little bit. But these are the sacrifices that we must endure in order for the beautiful panel work of Todd McFarlane, which I think Todd McFarlane's panel work is better than his art, and I think that's actually his shining achievement is just deconstructing the whole what it means to be a comic book page.
Right. You know what? I was actually thinking about this with him and also with Rob Liefeld, who I don't think we've ever talked about on the show.
Man.
But it's almost like Todd McFarlane. It would be ideal if Todd McFarlane laid out the page, then someone else drew the anatomy, and then he came back and did all of his detail. But it's like someone else needs to do the actual nuts and bolts, but he can do the flashy layout, he can do the lines, but in between, that's where he loses me, at least.
Yeah, because the characters most of the time look very ugly, but if you just look at the silhouettes and where the characters are with the setting and the objects around them, it's so beautifully laid out, and the story being told in the panels is always good.
Yep.
But I agree. A lot of the times, the anatomy is just wild.
It's unfortunate because a lot of in that panel that Mike was talking about, the perspective shot near the beginning when he's looking down from the building is beautiful. Like, his architecture is good. So I think what Todd McFarlane needed to do was a mech comic where every mech wears capes.
Yes, there you go.
And it would have been sick.
Yeah.
No soft edges for Toddy Boy.
No soft edges, no faces,
no
expressions.
None.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Cracked
well,
it.
Let's be clear. When these guys went to Image, look what happened. Todd McFarlane created Spawn, who's basically just black costume Spider-Man combined with Batman, right? Big cape. Mm-hmm. Mark Silvestri did Cyberforce, which is just robots and hot chicks, like
robots and titties.
Yeah, that's that. They just drew whatever they wanted. Eric Larson did Savage Dragon. Like it was like basically the mentality of a teenager. I'm just gonna draw whatever looks cool, right? Man, they got to do it and they made money. So
and it does look cool.
It does, yeah, to some extent. Yeah, I can't argue with that. And
also, don't think I don't like Cyberforce. I like big armored dudes and titties. Like, don't get me wrong. There's a place for it, and it's any of those Image guys. It's just, yeah. I don't know how I feel about this one. Story's fine. It was more like just introducing this new chapter in Peter's life, right? So they're like, well, how do we do that make it interesting? I would have loved more like Peter registering for college classes. I would have loved that. But no.
Remember the issue where he just waited in line for the whole issue? Mm-hmm. That was great. It was like Seinfeld. Yeah, exactly. It was awesome.
And then he fights the bad guys that matter.
Right. Yeah, again, this is kind of a typical Amazing. So I can't really criticize it because it's kind of like as flimsy as all the previous issues. So if you're looking for superhero fun with McFarlane art, then read this one, but it's not a masterpiece. Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of I would go so far as don't read it, pick it up, look through it, look at the pictures. Like Becca said, the panel work is awesome. Love it for that. Story's fine. You can read it, whatever. But the panel work is awesome. The way like you said, the way he does the comics is amazing. So appreciate it for that, and I would recommend it for that.
All right, Josh, what do you think?
This might be the first time in a while I don't recommend the Amazing. It's just the story is not there. I think we all agree that visually it looks very good most of the time. Definitely flip through it, like Bob was saying, but I think this one can definitely be skipped.
Bex Luthor?
Yeah, as much as I did like some of those little things, I think what Bob said, where you just do a quick scroll through or a page flip if you've got it. Maybe don't crack open a 311 and just start whipping through pages, but also you do you, is whatever. It's fine. Read it or don't. All you need to know is Peter is back in school and has a new professor.
That's what's important. Yep.
Oh, they saw Bambi.
They did see Bambi. And neither of them was crying when they left the theater, which bothered me a little bit.
Yeah. You would think Peter with the dead mom and Mary Jane with the dead mom would cry.
Yeah, you're
Heartless.
right. Good point. Okay, on that note, we're going to jump to another Amazing Spider-Man comic. And this is the beginning of my favorite crossover event. And I'll tell you about why it's my favorite later.
You better.
But who remembers Inferno? Who read Inferno when it came out? Nobody except me. Okay.
We weren't born yet.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, Inferno
I'm not quite that young, but I did read it when it came out.
Yeah,
I still haven't actually read it.
Really? Okay, so to summarize quickly, Inferno was an X-Men event. However, weirdly, X-Factor and X-Men all crossed over, but New Mutants was separate. So in the New Mutants book, it was all about, what's her name, Magic going to Limbo and such, fighting Naster and blah, blah, blah. And then in the X-Men were attacked by Goblin Queen, who was actually Madeline Pryor. And in the midst of all this, Limbo kind of leaked into our world. I always call it the Ghostbuster effect. Act 3 of Ghostbusters, when New York is haunted by all those ghosts. That's what Inferno was. All of New York was taken over by these supernatural forces, and buildings were inhabited by ghosts and demons, and like mailboxes would bite you and buildings would grow, and it was just a fun crossover because you didn't necessarily need to read the main story to know what was going on. You just had to know the environment, and that's why I thought it was really cool.
Okay.
And Spider-Man ate it up because Spider-Man happened in New York, so...
Yeah, so don't just read this issue to know what's going on, though.
No.
I had a completely different perspective because I read the Daredevil run while this was happening, and I was like, what the hell's going on? This is dumb. Why is this happening? Nothing's explained. Why is this leaking into Daredevil?
Good, fair point.
I had the same thought here. It's like, it seems like an interesting story in the X-Men stories, but like with no context at all, it's like, I get why they brought it into Daredevil and Spider-Man because they're in New York, but also why, other than to get us to read these stories?
Can I also just say, in my youth, before I was exposed to such writers as William Shakespeare and Ernest Hemingway, I thought this was the best story ever written, meaning Inferno. Inferno specifically was the best story ever written. Yes, Becca.
Wait.
You go ahead.
I'm sorry.
What I have to say is...
This being a Claremont story, I'm assuming you've read prior X-Men stories, and this one was the best.
For some reason, yes, this one was specifically the best story ever written. Yes.
Okay, that's okay. I just wanted to get that on record.
I don't believe it anymore. I just believed it at the time when I was 11, 12. Anyway, go ahead, Becca.
So I just opened up the page for the Inferno event because I wanted a little bit more context. And it describes like what all of the hero teams and everything and what they were doing during the event. And this one is the other heroes in New York. And it talks about how they weren't directly involved in the event, but they had certain things that bled through to them. So the first point is what happens in Spider-Man, which I knew, but I'm not going to say for spoilers' sake. So it's the Inferno events kind of bonding with the Spider-Man world and what's going on there. The next one is talking about how the new Avengers is formed. I was like, okay, cool. Mr. Fantastic, Gilgamesh is in there.
Right, yeah.
Human Torch loses his powers. Okay, cool. The Power Pack siblings, their identities are revealed to their parents. Oh, well, that's pretty dramatic. No. Yeah, that's like a big thing for the Power Pack. And then it says... and then it says, Daredevil fights an evil vacuum cleaner. That's it.
It's not great. It's not great. In the middle of Ann Nocenti's run, it's like, what is going on? Why is this happening?
All these other points are like life-changing things. Like the Human Torch loses his powers. The Power Pack has to reveal their a secret identity. The thing that happens in Spider-Man is kind of a big deal. And then it just says Daredevil fights an evil vacuum.
It was an important issue. Anyway.
So no wonder you didn't like this event if you got the Daredevil perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
You were like, why do I care? Because this is what I was confused too. I was like, what do you mean the Inferno event continues? I don't remember reading anything about Inferno. But that makes sense now that it was an X-Men thing pouring over.
Yes, definitely.
And this happened, I guess, about a year after where I've left off on X-Men. I might pick it back up, but...
Oh, so you're rereading X-Men right now?
Well, not right now. It was about a year and a half ago, and I stopped basically shortly after X-Factor formed, maybe X-Factor 10-ish, and I think this is about a year after that, so...
You got to keep going at least until Claremont leaves the book. You have to.
I'll pick it back up. It was just at the time, it was like I started rereading X-Men, and it's like, okay, I'll reread New Mutants. And then X-Factor picked up, and then they started doing all these side issue, limited series and stuff. I was like, okay, now it's like every month there's 4 or 5 comics, and it just became too much.
Yep.
And so.
All right.
So anyway.
I guess we should start, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The review of this one.
Spider-Man.
No evil vacuum cleaners, unfortunately. But we do get this rad Todd McFarlane cover with Spider-Man in the Mysterio globe. This is dope.
It is good.
See, when people say they like McFarlane. Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
It's also kind of a bummer cover.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a bummer
cover. Why is it a bummer cover?
I wish that Mysterio was not on the cover.
Yeah,
because then there would be some weight to figuring out who this is, because it's not like we see Mysterio throughout and we the audience know, and Spider-Man is slowly figuring it out. Like, we're trying to figure it out with Spider-Man. They don't reveal it. It's like a huge reveal at the end, and it's like, yeah, of course it's Mysterio.
I have a problem with that too.
Comic.
By the way, Becca, before you go forward, I have to point out 2 things. Bob, are you familiar with the whole shtick of Todd McFarlane inserting Felix the Cat into every issue of Amazing Spider-Man?
I think I'd heard that. I wouldn't say I'm familiar, but yeah, I think I was aware of that. Yeah.
Because not only does he do that, I should also remind our listeners, he also puts hidden spiders into his covers. And if you look at Mysterio's glove things, you can see right 1, 2, 3, at least 4 or more Spider-Man or spiders. And I'm not sure if he does it throughout the issue or if it's just on the cover, but it's definitely in there. And that's why if you look at the cover of Spider-Man #1, the famous Spider-Man #1, there's like a whole bunch of little spiders. And that was the joke, is that it was like infinite spiders on the cover of Spider-Man #1. It was like the running gag, the culmination of the running gag. So anyway, sorry, Becca.
No, it's fine. No, I was just going to say off of Josh, when he does find out who it is, which we will get to, was it last week where he just was like, aha, it was this person the whole time?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that was Chameleon. That was last week. Yeah. That
he was like, it was Chameleon. It's the same. It's the same.
Right.
Yeah. And one other point of this cover is, one, it gives away the reveal, but also it made me think, like halfway through, I'm like, is this going to be one of those comics where Mysterio shows up in the last panel?
Yes.
And the cover was just a lie the whole time? And I'm glad it wasn't at least that.
Yeah, he was in the last couple panels, so.
Yeah, it was like, a couple pages.
Right.
All right, so we start off and Peter's at the library because he's a big square nerd, and the stone lions in front of the library are coming to life. And Peter's like, well, that's pretty weird. So he starts trying to defeat them and getting people out of the way. He crushes the stone lions and they still move, and he's really grossed out about it, which, fair. Sorry, I had a pop-up ad because there's hot women in my area.
And they're Russian.
And they're single and Russian. And definitely not spies. Also, what's your credit card number? So, Peter flies off and he's like, well, that was really weird. And he confronts this couple being mugged by this guy who he recognizes as Peanut, whatever his name was, don't remember. Not
Mulroney.
important. Sure. So Peter webs the gun from him, and the couple's like, oh my god, wow, thanks so much. And then all of a sudden the entire brick wall that he was standing on turns into a big giant golem. And Peter's like, well, that's pretty weird. And he's swinging around trying to defeat it. And then the regular human man who he had just saved was like, don't worry, Spider-Man, I'll help you. And flicks the giant, massive stone golem's leg and gets crushed to death. And his girlfriend or wife is just there crying. And Peter's like, well, got somebody killed. That sucks. And he's very, very guilt-stricken about this. Mm-hmm. When meanwhile, just directly after a man has died, we see Mary Jane in a tube top, just to lighten the mood. She's feeling the air conditioning's broken. Oh, fun and flirty.
And the skimpiest of skimpy shorts that you could possibly
Daisy
wear.
Dukes, yeah.
Why even wear denim shorts? Just we know your underwear's the same size underneath there. But anyway, so Peter comes in a haze from the door, and he's very distraught and tells Mary Jane the whole story, and she doesn't really know what to do because people keep dying. What does she even say? Peter has to go to class the next day, and he's very zoned out. He just ends up walking out of the class, and he runs into Kurt Connors, who is also acting very weird. I'm sure the lizard will show up again soon because everybody else is. Why not? So Peter goes to the lab where he's a research assistant at, and he still can't clear his head. So he ends up just going home. But it turns out that him and Mary Jane had a prior engagement at a country western bar. So we have a very funny panel of Mary Jane in a beautiful pink cowboy hat and just the lowest top you can imagine, and Peter's so sad directly next to her, and I'm like, dude, just look up a little bit, it's just so funny. He's like, my life's so hard and bad, and Mary Jane, the most beautiful woman in the world, is just sorry, what can I do to make it feel better? What a godly woman. So a fight breaks out because why wouldn't it? And Peter has to stop this guy from hurting somebody else, and Mary Jane explains to him that that's why she loves him, is because even without his superpowers, he would probably stop to help people. And that's what this other guy did. It's it's not your fault he died. He made a choice. and his choice was to jump into the fight, even though it was a dumb choice, but it was his choice to make. So it helps Peter feel a little bit better. And then he's swinging around. He's like, man, I feel a little bit better, but it still kind of irks me a little bit. It's like, you know what else irks me? All this weird fog that's everywhere and these illusions. And then he's like, oh my God, it's Mysterio. Yep. All right. He's like, fog, illusions. There's only one guy I know who fits that bill. So then he's like, goes to look for information on Mysterio. He tracks down this peanut guy who he's like, who hired you? Blah, blah. And then he gets another location and just bounces from location to location. And who is it? It's Mysterio. So Mysterio just gives him his whole plan, was like, I faked that guy's death so that you would feel guilty about it. Do you feel guilty about it? And Peter's like, no, it wasn't real. And he's like, ooh, feel the guilt, Peter. Like, I don't understand what's going on here. So
that's what I don't get. So was it fake or not?
It was all an illusion. I think the rock golem, because Peter goes to the wall where the rock golem was, and there was no wall. Or like nothing was broken or anything. So they have a very interesting fight where Peter thinks he's fighting illusions, but he's actually fighting animatronics. And the reason he doesn't notice this is because his spider sense has been dulled by some gas that Mysterio has. Maybe should be more concerned about that, but isn't. So he fights these $1 million animatronic aliens that are massive. And I don't know where Mysterio's getting the budget from. And he breaks into the basement and he busts the power so that Mysterio's animatronics can't move anymore. And he's still trying to, like, haunt him with the ghost of the dead man who wasn't real. They have a little bit more of a fight, I think. And then that's... Oh, no, they're still fighting, but then we switch over to...
Well, no, he punches him in the face. That's how he defeats him. Isn't that great?
Right.
So clever.
Breaks his globe right open.
Right into his face. Right. And then he goes home, and then we switch over to Harry Osborn, who is having Green Goblin nightmares again.
Which is a great ending. It's a very well drawn epilogue, but
I was gonna say the epilogue is great. The ending to the actual story, however, is really disappointing. I really like the setup of this issue. I love the fact that Peter thinks that he just killed a civilian. Right. That is such a great story element. That the fact that, like, he's trying to, like, suck it up and go to this event with MJ, and then MJ stops and, like, takes him up to that like balcony area and, like, talks it through with him. That is 100% the best part of this issue, I think, is them at the bar talking it out, and MJ being like the voice of reason, you know, saying, if you didn't have your powers, would you have stepped in to stop that guy? Yeah, I would have. So it's not Spider-Man's fault. It would have happened either way. Like, it's so great her being
I agree.
here.
That's good writing. I agree.
It's fantastic. And then, honestly, even the Mysterio stuff, I kind of like. The fact that he, like, realizes that it's Mysterio is whatever. But I like that he goes to interrogate the guy, because he's like, how is this guy tied in with it? So he's like, of course, he used, like, a real person to, like, make it feel like a real crime that Spider-Man would be familiar with. And then, like, even the fight itself with Mysterio is kind of fun, but it's just so anticlimactic with, like, the aliens and, like, I don't know, there's a lot of it that's kind of just falls flat right at the end with the final Mysterio confrontation.
The thing is, you know, looking at this from the point of view of, you know, me as a kid, when Mysterio shows up, it's great because he looks cool, and also McFarlane experiments with the page design again, right? By having Mysterio's cape create
be
panel
like the
borders,
actual panels.
Right?
Yeah, it's great.
Right, it's a great design. So you're excited about that, but it's like, okay, but you've also got to tell a story, and what ends up happening is you have this little subplot, not subplot, but like the whole trick with Mysterio, just like they did in the second Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland, is to make Spider-Man not know what's reality and what's real, or what's fake, which is cool. But then what happens? He just like if you look at these panels, he sees the ghost of the guy, and then he says, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." And then he punches what?
The electrical panel.
Okay, but
makes
where
everyone-
was
That's a good idea.
it's just the way that it's in the panel. Now you look over and you see Mysterio like falling over. And first, of course, I'm reading a digital copy, so the white part is there's like a huge section of dialogue that's like blanked out. I can't even read it.
Mm-hmm.
But it says, "I figured Mysterio something the illusion that he wasn't. Now he can't control those illusions." And then he just punches Mysterio in the face. It's just very anticlimactic. Becca, what do you think?
Yeah, it's you get this really cool cover, and then there's what 1, 2, 3 pages with Mysterio on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's one full page in the fight that's just alien monsters. I don't want to see alien monsters. I want to see 50 Mysterios.
Mm-hmm. Imagine if I think the biggest problem with that fight at the end is that once Peter realizes that it's Mysterio, all of the illusions are moot. He knows that these aliens are not real. Yep. So why not make the illusion like an innocent bystander that Mysterio has and is gonna like kill them or something like that.
Right.
So like, you know, they're dangling by a rope and like, you come near me, I'll cut the rope. And Peter's got to be like, I don't know if this is real or not. So I have to go and like go into this fight as if it were real, just in case it is. Right? Like make it realistic. When you have these big aliens and like ghosts showing up, it's like, of course it's not real and it's not like.
Right. Yep.
You know.
I agree. That's the thing is there is a way to do this story right. And that's in Spider-Man. What was the second one called? Far From Home?
Far From Home, yeah.
When there's points in the movie where you really don't know exactly what's happening. And it's exciting when Spider-Man realizes it's an illusion. And I don't remember how it works, but anyway, it's just, you're tricked too as an audience member. What you're reading this story, you're not tricked. You're just like, oh, you're just going through the motions. Okay, now you're fighting this monster. Now you're doing whatever. It's like blah, 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 blah. Bob, what did you want to say about this one?
I don't really have anything to say about this one.
Okay.
I mean, everything you got. It's so much that could have been good that just wasn't.
Right.
Yeah. It's just very disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
There's some more cool artwork, I guess.
Well,
yeah.
You know, someone once said that the problem with McFarlane and all of his ilk is that when kids remember a comic like this, they're going to talk about the art, but they're not going to talk about the story. They're not going to talk about the cool things that happened in the story. They're just going to talk about how cool Mysterio looked in his cape and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, that's all just fluff. That's just superficial, right? Like you want to be talking about the story turns and like, can you believe what happened in Spider-Man this week, right? But that's not what's happening here. You're excited about it because of the way the cover looks and because of the promise what's to happen. But then you read the story and it just falls flat. And then the next issue, it's another villain. Oh, now I'm excited because McFarlane's going to draw Green Goblin. Now I'm excited because McFarlane's going to draw the Scorpion. But at the end of the day, it's almost like a bad summer blockbuster where every month you're tricked into reading it again, right? Anyway.
Yeah, like what I said about almost being happy that it wasn't just the last page Mysterio shows up, but this is probably even worse because Mysterio shows up and then 3 pages later he's beaten Mysterio.
Right, exactly.
It's like, what's even the point of this?
With a punch.
With a punch, just punches him and then he's done. Punches an electrical box and then punches Mysterio. Apparently the electrical box is all I needed.
Right. Becca?
I think the best part, or maybe the only good part about this very brief run-in with Mysterio, and it has nothing to do with anything for Spider-Man, but it's for the rest of the it kind of has to do with it, but I think for like the rest of this Inferno story, now Peter's gonna think it's Mysterio. So I'm sure that reveal, if it ever happens for Peter, which maybe it doesn't, because it's like an X-Men crossover, so who knows? But it's going to be cool for him to find out that all of these weird things that's happening isn't Mysterio, because they're not real
Right.
and they're not animatronic. I just wish there was more Mysterio. But I will say I disagree with Mike. I do remember that Mysterio looks really cool in this issue, and that is important to me, personally.
Well, that's what I said, though. Kids will talk about how cool he looked,
Kids
but they won't
being
talk about the story.
I
kids
am
being
kid,
us.
I am baby,
Yeah.
and I think like Mysterio's cape is cool,
Mhm.
and is that good enough for me? Maybe it is. I do want to say one other good thing about this issue, though, especially compared to Spectacular, is they don't cut into the issue 5 times with Harry Osborn having nightmares. They just do it at the end.
They save it
Yeah.
for the
Oh,
end.
true.
Good point.
It's just
Let's
at
talk
the
about
end.
that epilogue.
It's just at the end. There's a splash of the Green Goblin, just a sliver of the Green Goblin. Totally fantastic. And Harry Osborn is like checking on his son, and then there's Hobgoblin in the shadows. That's cool.
That's
I want to
great.
read the next. Like, yeah, this story kind of blew, but now I want to see what happens.
I
Man,
agree.
he draws Green Goblin so well.
Yep.
Yeah.
That panel
that-
is fantastic.
It's great, and that green face, and that purple hood, and the purple glove.
The
it just looks-
jaw, like
Ugh.
the teeth, is just maybe the most menacing he's looked up until this point.
Uh-huh.
I think he just can't draw regular people. Like,
That's
No, that's
you're
definitely-
right.
the
maybe,
case.
maybe,
That's like
but it
Yep.
definitely it's in his favor.
Mysterio
That
looks
panel.
really good. The Green Goblin's already fucked looking. Spider-Man, it doesn't have a face, so like that's why the Spider-Man face generally looks alright. Sometimes his
Yeah.
anatomy is a little weird because he's just a skinny dude. But there's more like you can't hide Spider-Man in a cape like you can with all the other characters. These aliens, can we talk about these aliens though? They are not it. Toddy boy, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This is aliens from a space movie, and this is what we did. Why?
The green one almost works. That other one,
Like, did he just start
kind of a bunch of
scribbling?
lines.
And then he's like,
Yeah.
these will be legs.
Yeah.
Like, was there a character design
Yeah.
sheet? Like, I want to see like a cosplay breakdown, or like of these like how many limbs there are, and like a full 360. Because I don't think that's possible.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's no way the muscular skeletal system of this alien works to hold him up. Like, even though he's got one big foot, but it's all connected by like 6 joints that are all connected to one little limb. It's, none of this works.
Like, dude, just
Terrible.
throw a
Just
cape
terrible.
on it.
Throw a cape on it.
Oh yeah,
Then he can
that
fly.
might work.
So I just want to point out again, in this period in Spider-Man history, how exciting it was to pick up an issue of Spidey and see Green Goblin on the last page, because the Harry Osborn Green Goblin had not been seen since Amazing Spider-Man 136.
Norman, right?
No, the Harry one, because Norman
Yeah.
died in 122.
Oh.
Harry became the Goblin for only, I think, 2 issues,
And then-
it was in a.
Oh, sorry. Go
And then
ahead.
it was Bart Hamilton for like 1 issue in like the 180s. So there'd been no Green Goblin for like 150 issues or something. Like,
Years.
it was just a different time. Huh?
It's been years, right?
Yeah, it's been years, right? So at that time, it was a different, like we mentioned earlier, like the Chameleon hadn't been seen in like 15 years. Like that amount of time could not pass today without seeing a character come back, right? So it was just a different time. Anyway, who gives a shit? The comic sucked. Okay, so
I mean,
do I
it's
recommend
cool.
it? Yes, I still recommend it. It's still a decent issue. Becca, do you recommend it?
Yeah, Mysterio's my boy. He's my favorite Spider-Man bad guy. I'll take 3 pages of Mysterio over no Mysterio. I'm sorry. Just again, give it a good swipe through. Just look at the pretty pictures.
All right, Josh.
Yeah, I think this is some of the best stuff with Pete and MJ. I really like them together in most of the Amazing issues. It's a really good build-up. It kind of falls flat. I would definitely recommend it with the caveat that the ending is kind of a letdown.
Right.
So it's kind of like a mild recommendation. Maybe not even recommend the whole comic, just to kind of read a few parts of it. But
Okay. Bob, what do you think?
Yep, just like the last one. flip through it, scroll through it, whatever you're doing. Enjoy the art. You don't need to read the story. It's fine.
All right. Okay. Ooh, it's a rough week for Spidey, but now we're going to jump to the Spectacular Spider-Man 146. This is a comic that I bought when I was a kid off the stand. It was an Inferno crossover, and I loved it. And I'm going to tell you what happens in this one. We start off with an excellent cover by Sal Buscema. We see Harry Osborn and Spidey being attacked by like pipes from a building. And in the background, the hobgoblin's kind of flying away. And Harry Osborn explains exactly what's happening by looking at the reader and saying, "What's going on? My factory is attacking me." And at the bottom, we see the title of the story, Night of Madness. And I love it. Actually, it's called Demon Knight. But anyway. So we start off, broad daylight. Spidey's swinging along, doing some friendly neighborhood web swinging. And he gets attacked by like a, what's it called? Like a, not a chimney, but like an air vent.
Yeah, like an exhaust vent or something.
Haunted exhaust vent with like teeth. It's a nice little opening scene to kind of establish, you know, the Inferno connection, which I love. Spider-Man ends up ripping the thing off and expecting to find like circuits and computers and robot stuff inside because he's expecting it to be Mysterio, I think. Does he mention Mysterio here?
Yeah.
He mentions him somewhere.
Yeah.
But no, it ends up being nothing inside. So he's like, well, what the heck is going on? He doesn't know, right? So then he goes home and he's, you know, he sees a note on his fridge saying that MJ is gone. And I think the continuity might be a little bit out of whack here, but last week or last month, we were introduced to MJ's cousin, Christy. And I guess Christy Watson is now living with them in their apartment. So she's like Mary Jane's little teenage cousin, and she has red hair and pigtails. And
I need a disorder.
Well, we're not. Spoiler alert: we haven't got to that part yet.
I mean,
but we cut over.
It's very obvious.
We cut over, and Mary Jane is carrying groceries, and Christy's eating, and Mary Jane's talking about how she can eat and eat and eat, and Christy, and not get fat or not get overweight or whatever. So, haha, funny. So they're all joking around, walking home, and then we see a little flash of Inferno again, where a little light post comes to life. Then we cut over to Joe Robertson, who is now out of the hospital, walking with a cane, and he's trying to recuperate from having his spine nearly broken by Tombstone. And in previous issues, he has decided that he is going to plead guilty to the charge of being an accessory to murder, because years ago he saw Tombstone murder someone and decided not to reveal it to the police. And so Tombstone's been able to like walk free for all these years and kill other people. And so this is actually a good dilemma, because Joe Robertson's wife is like, well, I understand, but you also have a family to feed and protect, and now you're going to basically go to jail and leave us all here out in the cold. So really, is what you're doing the right decision? So she doesn't obviously think so, right? So Joe Robertson has a decision to make here. So then we cut back over and picking up at the epilogue of the ending of Amazing Spider-Man, and we see that Harry Osborn is having sleepless nights. And he's like, you know, whose face? Not mine. He's seeing somebody's face, but it's not his. We don't know who yet, right? Because we haven't got to the end of the issue. And then, it's okay, because what's his son's name? Is it
Norman?
Baby Harry? No,
It's
Baby
Norman.
Norman.
Yeah.
Normie.
What a fucking
We see this
normie.
nice little picture of of him picking up Normie out of the crib and like rocking him, and you know, everything is all back to normal. But is it Liz? Yeah, Liz is all worried and is like, something fishy's going on here. And then just outside we see, on a goblin glider, the hobgoblin watching from afar and then flying away. It's a great shot. Then we see a little funny scene of Peter Parker in his apartment. He doesn't have his towel, so he asks Mary Jane to hand it to him, but it's actually Christy that hands it to him. And there's this little joke of Christy being accused of flirting with Peter Parker by Mary Jane and blah, blah, blah. And then Harry Osborn calls up Peter and he's like, you know, we got to talk. You know, can you come out to my chemical plant? Because Harry Osborn has taken over the business, the you know, what's it called? Oscorp, whatever the hell it's called, from his father who died like 10 years ago. And then we cut over to an ongoing subplot of basically mafia hits happening throughout the city. And this is, what's his name?
Ben Urich?
Ben Urich is on the scene of this massacre of all these dead bodies. In fact, I didn't realize there's actually a woman among these dead bodies in the foreground there. Like at least 10 or 15 people have all been massacred. They're all laying there bloody in the middle of this restaurant. And the cops are there and they're, trying to figure out what's going on. And then sure enough, the arranger comes, which is the Kingpin's right-hand man. And so they want to question him. And he's like, oh, I have no idea what's going on. And so then the cops start yelling at him and freaking out. And he's like, whatever. So then Ben Urich calls over to, what's her name? Is this Kate Cushing?
This is Joy Mercado.
Yeah.
No, it's Joy Mercado.
Oh.
Joy Mercado, right?
Right.
And I don't remember, what do they talk about here? Oh, just telling him the story, basically what's going on, right? Like 20 dead, gangland killing, blah, blah, blah. And then just at that moment, J. Jonah Jameson comes storming into the room. J. Jonah Jameson's kind of filling in for Joe Robertson because Joe Robertson's technically the editor-in-chief, but now he's off on kind of sick leave, right? And JJJ is the publisher, but he's kind of doing double duty now. Mm-hmm. So he comes in, he's all pissed off, and the reason he's pissed off is because they've published a headline in the Daily Bugle that says poltergeists with an exclamation mark, and he basically is preaching to them that it should be poltergeist with a question mark if they want to be considered a respectable newspaper, right? Like they have to be kind of questioning everything and not reporting speculation as facts and blah blah blah. And what's her name? Gloria Brown is Joy is irritated because he's an asshole, but he's actually right. He's out of line, but he has a point.
That
right?
one is Kate.
So who remembers Gloria Grant? Does anyone remember Gloria Grant?
Nope, no, I don't think so.
F's in the chat.
So that's the thing, is that I don't know if we've ever come across her in this show, but I'm looking at her appearances. Okay, so. I'll have you guys know, she's been gone a while. She was in Amazing Spider-Man 206. Then she was in Spectacular.
Oh, wow.
She skipped to 228. So she missed like 100 issues. And then now she's kind of back now. Yeah, so she hasn't been around for a while. But anyway, so she shows up in the office. And then right away she bumps into a handsome Latino man named, what's his name again?
Eduardo Lobo.
Eduardo Lobo.
Not werewolf.
Lobo. Eduardo Lobo, yes, which means werewolf.
It means wolf.
It means wolf. Yeah, I guess. Okay.
Also, he wrote wolf in the blood on the.
Yeah, Kingpin wolves kill, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do you know it was him anyway?
I have a hunch.
Oh.
Okay. So anyway, so she is smitten with this Eduardo guy, and then we cut away to the Osborn Chemical Core plant, and Harry's walking along, and they start talking about Green Goblin, but no, he doesn't remember that he's the Green Goblin. He doesn't remember that his father was the Green Goblin. So he just knows that something's up. He's been having nightmares, right? And Peter's hoping that he doesn't remember that he was the Green Goblin. But then just at that moment, he looks over and all of a sudden the pipes start coming to life at the Osborn plant and attacking Peter and Harry. And then Spider-Man ducks into a corner, Peter ducks into a corner, changes to Spider-Man, and starts punching all the pipes. And like ripping them apart, and he's rescuing Harry, and they escape the Osborn chemical plant. And just at that moment, he looks up and he sees the Hobgoblin flying away. And then so the whole plant is basically on fire, and Harry is really pissed off, and he's like, my father was proud of this plant, proud of me too, though he never showed it. And now look at it. And now he's like, he's pissed off. He's like, oh, even if I rebuild it, it'll never be the same. Never, right? And so he's mad. And then we cut back to Harry at home in bed, and he's having nightmares again. The face in the mirror, not mine. And he walks over to the mirror, and he looks. Oh no, the voice coming from the mirror. Tomorrow's too late, Harry boy. So was today. You're mine, Harry. Always were, always will be. Daddy's little boy. And it's the Green Goblin looking at him through the mirror. And it's awesome. And yeah, I feel like a 12-year-old again. This was so cool. But anyway, I obviously love this story for many, many, many reasons. But Bob, I want to hear your opinion. What was your take on Spectacular Spider-Man 146?
It's okay.
Okay.
I mostly liked it. I get that they need to have the ongoing B plot, but what is it? 5 or 6, 7 pages of Ben Urich, and then J. Jonah Jameson and all that is like, what? Why are we here? Like, let's get back to the story. It just drug right in the middle of the story there. So I get, if I were reading this week to week, I'd probably care more. But having just popping into one issue, I was like, I don't care about this. Let's get back to what's going on with the Goblin stuff. So that was my big thought. But I enjoyed it. I like the art a lot. I like Sal Buscema a lot, so I definitely enjoyed the art on this one a lot.
Let's talk
different than McFarlane, but I like him.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever talked about Sal, our pal Sal, on the show, but so you are a fan though.
I am, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about him. I liked him as a kid, but I didn't love him. But now I really like him. I think he's to be honest, I think he's getting better and better every issue. So yeah, I have nothing bad to say about him. And this is where, to me, in a way, he was kind of peaking, like an early peaking. He was just great in the story. He was really having fun with the Green Goblin and with the whole Inferno stuff. So I really like this issue. But we can talk more about him in a minute. Josh, what did you think?
Yeah, this is kind of a really fun chapter in this ongoing story, and that's really what it felt like. I really appreciated that we didn't have to have like a big bad guy in this issue. There was no like punch to save the day at the end. Kind of catching up with like all of the characters and what's going on. While I agree with Bob, they almost always just cut in the middle of the action to do these like weird interludes. I felt like this issue felt like the most natural feeling to cut to those things, but it still feels off, especially if you're not reading it week to week. It's going to feel like, what is going on? Why do I care about these characters and what they're doing? If it doesn't have anything to do with the story arc that's going on. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I kind of liked this one. The whole Inferno thing is really weird, and like the things coming to life is fine or whatever, but it's really about Harry and what he's going through, and Peter being there for his friend. That's like super fun in this issue. Kind of like both Peter and Harry flashing back to Green Goblin and Norman for different reasons is like also really fun. One of my favorite lines my favorite line of this month for sure is in this issue as well. Right at the beginning. I don't know why this made me laugh so much, but when Peter's ripping apart the vent and he's like, there should be electronics inside. This thing, circuit, computers, robot stuff, but it's empty. There's nothing in this vent but vent. Right. That's so great. I love that, like, kind of corny, fun. Like, it feels like a classic Spidey line.
Right.
And I think this story really matches Sal Buscema's art. It has, like, a very classic, like, down-to-earth feel where McFarlane's kind of like crazy, way out there, experimental. This fits with like the more human story that's being told in this comic. Yeah, I thought all in all it was pretty good. Maybe the Chrissy stuff is a little weird.
Yeah,
her like just like watching Peter shower is like a choice.
She's like, don't worry, I have brothers. I've seen a penis or two before. And it's like, he's like, I don't care about that.
Right? Yeah. How does that make this okay? What?
Yeah.
And Mary Jane's like, don't flirt with my husband. And Peter's still like, what the hell?
Yeah, he's like pissed off in the background, like storming to his bedroom.
But I do love how, yeah, it's like you said, though, this issue has Inferno, it has Green Goblin, but it also has just completely mundane, like Joe Robertson going for a walk, and then Christy getting vegetables, and I love it. I just love that like keeping it grounded.
That Joe Robertson scene is so well written. I love the dialogue between him and his wife. The fact that like That was one of my favorite parts of this issue too. Was just the conversation between the two of them.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd leave that out. But yeah, the Joe Robinson part was actually my favorite part of the story. And if I were reading this week to week, I'd probably really enjoy the ongoing subplot. But just jumping in the middle is like, what is this going on? This doesn't make sense. But if I were reading it week to week, that's the kind of stuff I would love. But the Joe Robinson stuff was great. Like
I agree.
That's actually really good writing.
I agree.
Credit to Gerry Conway there, getting it done.
Becco?
Yeah, couple things. But on the Joe Robertson stuff, I did really like it. I love how stupid this man is. He was like, and how much he was like, a younger him was willing to give up doing the right thing to protect his family and to keep providing for his family. But now he's like, I gotta do the right thing to make myself feel better. Sorry, wife, sorry, kids. Brr, 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 brr. It's Joe Robertson time. Like, what a selfish asshole. And she's like, what about us though? Like, you were thinking about us before, and now it doesn't matter because you're guilty and you feel too bad about it. Like, too bad. You still have a wife and a family to support. I love her. I love her just very realist take on this. On like, what are you, stupid? Like, who cares if you're guilty?
Right.
Yeah, the way it ends is great too, with him like, you don't understand, and she's like, you're right, I don't, and slams the door. Like, she's
like, yeah, I don't. What about me?
Yeah,
your
also,
wife.
I mean, I also want to point out, we've already talked about Sal, and I love Sal, but one of the key things I like about him is, like, for example, when she slams the door and then it's just him sitting on his house by himself.
Yeah.
Look at the way the clouds are drawn. Look at the texture on the kind of like stairway beside him. This is a comic book. It's not meant to be realistic, right? It's clearly drawn with ink and with color, and I just love it. I just eat it up. And I don't get enough of that in modern comics. And, you can call me an old man yelling at a cloud for complaining about modern comics, but this is one of the reasons I love 80s comics, because it looks like it was drawn by humans, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to lizards?
As opposed to computers.
I don't know if you know how digital art works, but it's not...
Okay,
you don't push a button and the art happens.
Hold on a sec. I've seen footage.
A lot of comics now are drawn by lizard people.
I've seen footage.
That's fair.
Sorry, my bad.
Okay, so I've seen footage of an artist with a image of Spider-Man, like, swinging, and then he's like, I want his leg to be over here, and he takes the leg and he moves it as if it's like 3D animation. And I was shocked. And I posted this on Facebook, and there was guys who were like, oh, you obviously don't know how modern art works. And I'm like, no, this is not...
Do you think the leg was just generated, though? Like, they drew the leg first, and then they moved it.
But in order for it to move, it has to be programmed to...
No. They would select the arm with like a lasso tool, and then move where the pivot point is, and then move the leg.
But you have to program it to have a pivot point.
Well, you just have to draw your anatomy properly so the joints make sense.
Yeah, and then
you can move it.
You move the pivot point yourself. Like that's just like a Photoshop
Okay, but wait a
thing.
minute though. But why don't you just draw it with a pencil?
Because you're digitally drawing it, so you're digitally deleting it and digitally drawing it again. But instead of having to erase it and redraw it...
you don't see the difference? You don't see the difference? Okay.
There is a difference, but I don't want you to diminish the work.
It's not much different than if he'd have drawn it and cut it out very carefully with an X-Acto knife and had moved the leg.
Yeah.
It is different, but it's not
very
that
different.
much different.
I'll tell you why it's different, because if you draw an arm. Okay, let's just say my arm is like this, and then I draw it like this. You
Audio
can't just,
podcast, Mike.
You can't just. Okay, I'm holding it up straight, and then I'm holding it up like this, like down. You can't just cut out this arm and move it, because now all of these muscles have changed as well.
Well, then you just edit it to fix it.
You have to redraw it.
Well, you could redraw some of it, but you don't have to redraw all of it. How do you think they make comics as quickly as they do now? It's because you can do things.
But it's also why they look... I'm sorry, but Gerry Conway still writes Spider-Man sometimes. And I've read Gerry Conway comics. One of them was featuring Carnage. I could not stomach the art. And maybe this is why. Because it looks like it was drawn by a computer.
I mean, maybe it's also Carnage.
Well, it's also because it was terrible, but I'm just pointing out, and again, for all I know, maybe my favorite artists are using this technique, but if the art already looks terrible to me to begin with, and then I find out that they're using, it's like listening to modern music and going, wow, all this singing sounds like shit. What is that effect? Oh, that's called auto-tune. Oh, well, that makes sense. That's why it sounds like shit. So I'm kind of like, I'm just discovering why it sounds like shit. So maybe more art than I realize is used this technique, but for all I can tell, it makes art look bad.
I think all modern art uses that technique.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe that's why I don't like any of it.
Yeah.
Hey, kids, don't give up your dreams of being a 3D artist or a digital
Mike,
artist.
why did you have to say this on the kid episode?
The kids love the 3D art.
Just don't draw comics.
Mike, this is where it is. Mike, we're old men. We like what we like. And you know what? You're better off just not even trying the new stuff. Just wallow in the sadness of the old stuff and be happy.
The thing is, though, is that the artists that I like from the 80s, some of them are still drawing comics, and those are the guys that I follow, like Ty Templeton and Gerry Ordway and whoever else it may be. And their stuff is still good, so I'll just follow them.
But don't you like Babs Tarr?
Yeah.
She's a digital artist, fully digital.
Okay, but she is, but I can also see that she can draw excellent anatomy.
But just because you can edit it easily doesn't mean that it's not well drawn and not good anatomy,
but here's
right?
the problem, though, is the artist that I'm talking about, and I don't remember who he was, but even if he was, I wouldn't want to call him out, but his art looked terrible.
Get wrecked, that guy.
You know what I mean?
There's a decent chance that you're correlating digital art with bad artists, and they're not the same.
No, some artists are really bad. Like, if I could find that Gerry Conway, here, I'll find it right now as we're talking. Conway.
We just read the Todd McFarlane stuff, and some of that was brutal.
Oh yeah,
Right?
but we said that.
And
like,
he used a pen. Oh my God.
okay, here we go, folks. I'm gonna. You guys want me to name names?
I don't.
No.
We're just trying to defend digital artists.
Okay, here we go, guys. His name. There's two of them. Oh, there's three
This is
of them.
Mike's opinion. This is
Why
only
are there
Mike's
three people
opinion.
listed?
Go tag him on Facebook.
Okay, Mike Perkins is one of them. Hold
Ooh,
on.
I'm googling.
Okay,
Right,
Mike
we're all
Perkins.
Googling.
Hold on. Let me just see here. I don't know.
He looks like such a handsome, happy man.
I don't know if this is the
he's
guy
got
I'm
such
talking
a happy
about.
face.
I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is the guy I'm specifically talking about. Actually, no, it's not the guy I was talking about. But
Because like this
Well, you
stuff
put
looks
him on
good. Look at the
blast
swamp
anyway.
thing.
oh, you know who's one? Guess what? I've got one. Actually, no, I shouldn't say him. Forget it. Because
Can you put it in the chat so that we can decide if we think it's good or
I'll
not?
tell you later.
Yeah.
Anyway,
let's get back to spectacular.
Yeah, let's get back to
Right.
spectacular.
Anyway, digital art was real art, and moving on to what I thought about this issue.
Sure. I'll cut this whole part out. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I mean,
don't
the
worry
part
about
that we
it.
just did. Yeah.
Kirsty, Kathy,
Christy.
Christy, the cousin.
Yeah.
God.
Creepy storyline.
So this is the worst thing that comic books do. This is going to be some after-school special bullshit about this young girl getting an eating disorder because she's so thin and she eats so much. Like it's as obvious as the Lobo brothers being werewolves. Like I didn't need to look that one up.
Okay.
Maybe she's just got a great metabolism.
She doesn't.
Oh. Okay.
She does not. So this is gonna be some after school special bullshit. And this is just some dumb way to get Mary Jane her own side story when she was doing just fine being Peter's partner.
Mm-hmm.
She was doing great at developing her own character, at grasping with now she's married to a superhero and what that means for her, what that means for her future, and like how unstable it is. That was fantastic, but they just throw this character in. And now they're like, it's Mary Jane's problem now. Mary Jane's side story. She's going to have to deal with an eating disorder because she's a girl. And I just am so fucking mad because Mary Jane has been doing so well.
But wait
lately.
a minute. Don't you think it's important for a comic book to deal with eating disorders, though?
I don't think that this is the way.
Well,
How about a main character dealing with an eating disorder?
well,
What about Mary Jane? She's a model. She could have had an eating disorder.
Actually, I think
There you go.
she might have at one
You know,
point. She might have. I'm
Probably.
not sure.
I saw her waist in the Todd McFarlane issues. Something's going on there.
Todd McFarlane doesn't count. He draws you with 6 legs. He doesn't realize. Like, I thought it was a cape. It's just Do I think that the topic is important? Absolutely. Do I think that it's going to be the focal point of the next few issues of Spider-Man? No. It's just something for Mary Jane to do. It's lazy. If you want to tackle eating disorders, have Mary Jane have one. Have her deal with something like they deal with these kind of things in comics all the time. Like Miss Marvel was an alcoholic, but she was a main forefront character, and how alcoholism actually had something to do with the plot. Like if you're just gonna be like, hey kids, don't throw up after you eat.
Well,
like,
but here's the thing though. To be fair, Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers, she was not a main character at that point. That was when she was in the Avengers, right?
yeah, but she wasn't like the one of the superheroes' cousins who just showed up that we've never heard of before.
I mean, I guess they could have, but
kids can relate to this Pippi Longstocking character, right? She's a young girl
teenager,
with ponytail or pigtails.
I hate Christy. I hate Christy, and
Yeah,
I like.
And you're right, 100% for the record. But also, I like making jokes. But yes, this is terrible. Everything about this Christy storyline is terrible.
I don't like how she just
seeing her brother's penises for some reason.
I don't like how she just like
that.
sexually harasses Peter. That's not cool. Christy, I don't give a shit how old you are. Not cool. Don't look at a man's penis when he's vulnerable. Only when he's allowing you to.
But don't teenagers do that? And if they do, what's wrong with portraying it? I don't understand. Who says that she has to agree with your morality? She's a character in a story, right?
I hate her.
Are you talking about the penis part or the eating disorder
everything.
part?
Well, the penis part.
Okay, all the kids listening to this that came to listen to this podcast, it's not okay to look at people's penises.
Yeah, I've never
without their
snuck
consent.
around.
But what's
cool.
but
well,
if
it's
people
played off
do
as
that,
a joke because Mary Jane's like, "Don't flirt with my husband,"
yeah, but I'm
and
just
it's
saying, if people do it, what's wrong with portraying it in a story?
well, it's the framing of it, right?
Yeah, it's way too lighthearted.
You don't read a
Not
story
like,
about
hey, that's
murder,
super creepy.
and they're like, "Oh, this is the good guy, Homelander from The Boys," the guy we root for. No, he's framed as a bad guy.
I don't think it's that big a deal at all. Nothing. I mean, she's probably 5 years younger. Like, who gives a shit?
Okay, so Christy's a boy now. Christy's a 16-year-old boy, and he walks into the bathroom and Mary Jane is naked.
Yeah, I'd be the same thing. I would have done that when I was a boy.
That's not good.
No, it's not good. But portraying it in a story is not bad. You're just portraying
it
reality.
as a joke is the bad part.
I think that's the thing, right? It's like if that were to happen to you and you did that, there would be consequences for those actions.
Not necessarily.
Mary Jane literally
there should be
There
consequences.
should be, right?
There's
like
a panel where Mary Jane is like booping her on the nose with a big smile on her face.
And tells her not to flirt with her husband.
Yeah.
No. Do better.
All I can say, guys,
better.
is I grew up in the 80s, and trust me, no one gave a shit. Nobody.
I disagree. I think Peter gave a lot of shits. I think he's visibly uncomfortable. And I think if Peter was a real man, he would be very uncomfortable.
So they did show him to be uncomfortable, so that makes it okay now, right?
No.
What? No.
Why not?
That's not the point.
Because Mary Jane?
Because he's visibly uncomfortable, and then because of something that Christy did, he's upset, and there are no consequences for this character because of their actions making somebody else uncomfortable.
Yes, there are. Mary Jane
lecture on the nose.
Lecture,
says,
yes.
"Stop flirting with my husband."
Okay, what should she have done? What should Mary Jane have done?
Hey, don't walk in on my husband when he's naked in the bathroom in the home that we allowed you to.
But that's what she does in so many words.
It's not this big of a deal, but the fact that you're just like not even like.
No, because you're portraying things that happen in real life. Like, you don't have to make a morality call on every single little thing that happens in a story.
It's just gross.
Yeah, I think it's
Get
just
back
gross.
to the werewolves.
I think the fact that it stood out to apparently 3 out of the 4 of us says that something was weird
again,
here.
I was the one that grew up in this era, and it didn't faze me one bit.
I grew up in this era too. I'm only a few years younger than you, but it still jumped out to me. It's like, oh, that's kind of weird. I get why they did it, but still, it stood out to me. It's like, oh, this is strange.
We're not reviewing these in the context of the 80s. We're reviewing them now.
But that's the mistake. You have to review in the context that it came out, because it was published in the 80s.
Okay, well, it didn't age well.
Okay, well, you can say that, but again,
and I didn't like it, and I hate Christy.
I just don't think it's a big deal at all.
I think
don't
Christy
know.
sucks, and she should go back to Europe or wherever her parents are.
I don't like Christy
Christy's
either, but it's for
definitely
different
from
reasons.
Indiana.
Yeah, well, you're defending Christy for a lot for somebody who for Christy.
I don't even personally like when I saw Christy in the comics. I didn't even like her, so
Nobody likes Christy.
it's not that I like Christy, but whatever.
you don't
I just
like
think
her.
that was a big deal.
I'm glad she has an eating disorder.
Somebody said it.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, well, I recommend this comic. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think there's some really great stuff in this issue. Joe Robertson. I like all the Harry stuff. I like Harry and Liz's baby that already has a receding hairline. It's great.
Chip off the old
He's got
one.
that Osborne hair
Yeah,
for
that
sure.
classic Osborne receding hairline. And yeah. I don't know. I think I would recommend this one, especially reading the Spectaculars and knowing the context of everything. I really enjoyed this one, but I can also understand how somebody new going in and that's not familiar with what's going on right now would really not. So if you're familiar with what's going on at the time, I recommend this issue.
Becca?
Except for Christy, and not just the sexual harassment part, but everything that has ever been Christy. Yeah, so skip Christy, because it's not important. And I'm sure when she pops up later, it still won't be important or integral to the plot at all. At least with Joe Robertson's side story, it had to do with Tombstone, and Spider-Man fought Tombstone. I don't think Spider-Man's gonna fight bulimia, so just like
You never know what can happen. We'll see.
I guess the lamppost did
He'll punch bulimia in the face. And he'll
Yeah,
defeat
I mean,
The
in the
bulimia.
stomach.
Inferno event, bulimia could totally be a manifestation.
There's definitely like a Marvel X-Men who like makes people throw up called bulimia, like for sure, right? I'm looking it up.
Bob.
Yeah, I'd definitely recommend this one. I mean, if you're reading this issue to issue, I'm sure that this one is great. Even if you're not, the artwork's good, the story's good, some of the beats are really good. Hobgoblin's here, that's always fun.
Yep.
Do it, it's good.
And there's more. There's more where that came from Hobgoblin, which is
Yeah, that's gonna be cool. Because the Hobgoblin finally gets, cool.
yes, yeah. Well, I forgot about that. I was just talking about the fight with Green Goblin, but you're right. There's a whole other twist coming with Hobgoblin 2, which we won't spoil here in case you don't know what it is.
Hobgoblin 2. Jason.
Still Goblin.
Still Goblin.
I always love it. I always talk about this in Flea Market Fantasy when characters have a secret identity based on artificial powers, and then they get powers that match those artificial powers. Like, remember Hellcat? She wore I don't know if it was Hellcat or Cat. She wore like a cat suit and then magically got cat powers.
Yeah, she was the cat, and then she was Hellcat after she
Right.
got the powers. That happens a lot. Doesn't in some stories, Mysterio gets like real illusion powers.
Yep.
I think it happens to mostly Spider-Man villains.
It seems to, yeah. Like Black Lightning. I think he had a belt that gave him lightning powers, and then
Black Cat.
She didn't have any
Black
powers?
Cat. Right. It
Then
happens
she
a
gets
lot.
bad luck powers.
Well, there was one on one of the Flea Market fantasies you did recently. Wasn't it like a Crystar and a Moltar or something?
Yes, their names were Crystar and Moltar, and then they got superpowers and made Crystar into a crystal being and Moltar into a molten, like, lava being. Anyway.
Okay, but like, was that written in the same story? Like, they didn't like have
No.
fake powers for like 4 years and then
No, it was
get-
like in one issue. They were
Yeah.
named and then
Yeah.
given the powers. Because
Love
they were
that.
created
It
to
was
be,
just
to be toys, so.
it
yeah.
was just very convenient naming.
Okay. So
I love
my,
when that happens.
my air conditioning has been off for an hour and 46 minutes, so we're going to have to
Oof.
wrap this up. I think we all recommend this one.
Yeah.
And that's it. I guess we want to thank Bob for joining us. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for
Bob.
having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you on again soon if you're interested.
For sure.
Sure, I got nothing going on.
We're in our final year.
That's what
we're
I
in
say.
the final year of Spider-Cast reviews. We're only going to cover the 80s. Maybe we'll go further, but it depends on viewer response. Listener response. But very
Yeah,
likely
11
we're only going to do another year's worth, so.
11
I mean-
months worth of Spidey comics, and we did them all.
Yep.
I don't plan that far ahead, but I know that I'm not doing anything else, so.
Perfect.
I mean, I'm pretty sure all the listeners want the 90s Spider-Man comics. And
Yeah.
we're all anxiously awaiting the Clone Saga, so...
But everybody talks about the 90s comic. Nobody talks about what happened before, and...
Well, yes, but you can't just stop.
We've done Stranger Things.
That's true.
We actually don't have a Stranger Things podcast for the kids listening, just so you know.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Sorry to confuse you there. But anyway,
We do have
okay,
several
there you go.
others, though.
Yes, we do a show with the Orville in case anyone wants to know. Oh, I
The
guess we
kids
should
love
plug
the
our-
Orville.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The Orville's all definitely for the kids.
We have thousands of new listeners this week. We want to talk to them. Check out Morville Orville. Check out Flea Market Fantasy. Check out Full Volume Podcast. What else is there? Is that it? That's it.
Flea Market Fantasy, yeah.
The
And
Comic
here
Book
comes the
Syndicate.
Spider Cast. Oh, yeah, Comic Book Syndicate. The foundation of everything we do that we don't do anymore.
Yeah, I for all of the teenagers that Mike got to listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
Did you like tell them that they had to do it and then you were going to quiz them on it?
No, but they did
That's-
get 2% on a project for attending my lessons. So that's
They
kind
need
of
to
like
get 2%
coercing them.
more for listening to an episode of the podcast.
There you go.
And for
All right.
sticking it all the way through the end like this.
Yeah, you got to listen
sure
to
they're
a
still
whole
listening.
episode.
Next time, just go to class and play them an episode the whole time, and just kind of stand there and do like this. Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Hey kids, we're going to listen to my podcast today. The worst teacher ever.
Oh man.
And then they're like expecting like some gross like alpha male dude bro podcast, and then it's just us talking about Spider-Man for 2 hours.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I mean, we kind of briefly touched on where you can find us and where everything is. So please leave us a review on like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. You can find us anywhere at the Comic Book Syndicate. Please let us know what you guys think about the comics and the podcasts themselves. We want to keep that comics conversation going, so keep in touch.
That's right. And until next Monday, see you later.